I know self-publishing's not for everyone. Nothing is. But if you've considered self-publishing for even a minute, listen up, because I'm betting I know what's holding you back from exploring it further or getting started. Number one, you think the self-publishing process is a lot harder than it actually is. And number two, you're understandably afraid of doing it, air quote, wrong. So I've created a new free resource for you. It's called the Self-Publishing Starter Kit, and you can get instant access to it by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting publishaprofitablebook.com/self-publishing 101. In this free training, you'll discover the exact 4 steps to focus on and mistakes to avoid so you can publish an incredible book that's indistinguishable in quality from a New York Times bestseller without overthinking, overguessing, or overspending in areas that won't make a difference. Again, visit publishaprofitablebook.com/self-publishing 101 to get instant access. Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 6-time author and book editor, and I help people write and publish powerful, thought-provoking, wildly entertaining books without any more overthinking, second-guessing, or overwhelm than absolutely necessary. Because let's face it, some overthinking, second-guessing, and overwhelm is going to come with the territory if you're anything like me. I believe that story and shared perspective are 2 of the most potent ways we connect with one another, and that your story, perspective, and insights are destined to become someone else's favorite resource or pastime. For more book writing and publishing tips and solutions, and plenty of free and low-cost resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. And for recommendations of fabulous books you've possibly never heard of, book writing inspiration, and the occasional meme so relatable you'll wonder if it was created with you in mind, follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author. I feel like I could title this episode Podcasting with COVID, because that is what I'm doing. I somehow managed to avoid this for 4 years, but no more. I'm on day 8. But I'm functional enough that I was able to speak with Kathryn Biel today, who I really enjoy. I found her many, many months ago over on TikTok. She had, I'll explain at the beginning of our interview what had happened, but she created a video response to a statement made by a very well-known fiction author. And it was just a little bit unfair to self-published or indie authors. And she set the record straight, and she did it very eloquently and respectfully and honestly. And so I wanted to chat with her further about what her thoughts are overall in the self-publishing, in the indie space, because having written 20 books now, she's a fiction author. That is the space that she inhabits. And I wanted to get a sense of why, after so many books, she's committed to staying in the indie space, or even if she's committed to staying in the indie space, what would take her out of that space, what her definition of success is. I got a really interesting Instagram message yesterday from a friend of mine who is self-published. I posted it on my Instagram feed, so you can go check it out if you'd like. It was a friend of mine who, again, is self-published and just sold her 3,500th copy of her book. And this is someone for whom, when she first got started, agents and people I think she talked with an editor in the traditional world. She knew somebody, and they kind of were like, this book won't go anywhere. It's nonfiction, and it was based on her personal experience. And they were like, it won't go anywhere. And then she even had a manager at Barnes & Noble, tell her they would never carry a self-published book, which I know unequivocally is untrue. Is it less likely? Yes. Is it a little bit more challenging to get in there? It can be, because you've got to have a high quality product. She absolutely has that. So she sent me this message saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know, the last time we chatted, I had sold 2,000 books. Now I've sold 3,500. And I know that in the grand scheme of things in the traditional publishing world, that's nothing, but I'm feeling really happy about it. And my mom and my sister have even seen the book in their local Barnes & Noble. And I couldn't respond to her quickly enough because this is just a misconception that we have that 3,500 books isn't that many. I've said many times, most authors, especially traditionally published authors, really don't know how many books they've sold or are selling. And in defense of their publisher, it's hard to figure out sometimes because the sales are being reported from different channels on different timelines. You're also dealing with returns. They're managing all their other authors as well. It's not like it's just you that they're taking care of. So it's hard to get those numbers. And when you are indie, and certainly when you're self-published, you have access to all of those numbers because you're your own distributor. So you know how many you're selling through Amazon. You know how many you're selling through Ingram Spark. You know how many you're selling through Draft to Digital. You know how many you're selling directly if you're doing bulk sales or individual sales. So it's much easier to keep track of. But what most people don't realize is that most authors average, like 500 copies, even traditionally published books. That's where they would max out in most cases. So to sell 3,500 copies, whether you're traditionally published or certainly if you're indie, is a phenomenal accomplishment. So with Kathryn having 20 books under her belt now, I was very intrigued to find out how she defines success for herself, how that bar keeps moving. She still has a full-time job. And just like the rest of us, she is out there trying to find creative ways that feel good and fun to her to get the books out, whether it's Shopify store or a TikTok shop. And we talked about her experience with those things. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I'm always here for your comments, questions. You can email me or direct message me at any point on Instagram. My voice is about to disappear, so let's just move right into the interview. So you've written now 20 books?
Yes.
Okay. And I discovered you, right, over on TikTok where I never am. I almost have, it's become like a challenge to not be on TikTok because I've told so many people I'm not going on TikTok. And then I found myself on TikTok. But it was probably a couple months ago, you had made a video response to a rather well-known author who had gone pretty public with a generalized statement that people who self-publish are lazy. Is it fair to summarize it that way?
Yeah, taking the easy way out.
Taking the easy way out. Yes, yes. And I thought your response was so eloquent. And I just loved it because you were like, look, here's the deal. And so the first thing I wanted to ask you is what, in your experience, is the biggest misconception about self-publishing?
That it's not real publishing and that self-published or indie authors aren't real authors because we didn't go through that process. So it's not real. It's not valid. Years ago, I was in a group on Facebook and a traditionally published author said, oh, I do a radio show or I do a podcast. I'm looking for volunteers. So I messaged her. We were corresponding back and forth. And then she said, well, who's your publisher? And I said, I am. And she said, oh, I'm afraid I can't have indie authors on there because you're not a real author because anyone can self-publish a book. And I just stopped responding. And then she tried to do all this damage control. And it was like, nope, that tells me all I need to know about you.
But so I find this fascinating because if we're going to boil it all the way down, she's not wrong, right? Right.
Correct,
I mean, but there's this blatant misunderstanding of there's kind of almost multiple tiers of self-published authors. So there's this one category that we won't spend any time in because it's not where we live, but where there is just this thought of, oh my gosh, I can write a book in 4 hours, throw it up on Amazon, make $1 million and be right. And those don't go anywhere. So, and there's not, it's a very transactional experience because in that case, the author is really only doing it for themselves to make money for themselves or whatever it is they want to do. They're not writing it, they don't want to get an editor and they don't want to do all the things and make it. But there's this other, I'm still just so surprised that we're not talking about this more. This other segment of authors who are working as hard, if not harder than their traditionally published counterparts in some cases, and are still being dismissed as not air quote real.
Yeah. And it's tough because, I think in some ways indie authors have to work harder because we're a one person show. Like this is it. I'm my company. I certainly have some subcontractors that I hire for different things.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff I've even taken on myself, partly because one of the things I like about self-publishing is the control aspect, and like I can control timelines. And so one thing that I took over for myself was cover design, because when I want my cover, I want it now. Or I don't want to have to like think about my cover for a book I'm going to write in 6 months to get in with the cover designer. But yeah, so we are doing all these aspects, and I don't have a team to get my book to readers. If I am emailing an ARC copy, it is coming from my personal computer. Like I am writing that email. I am doing all those things. If I'm sending books out, like that people have purchased through my different stores or whatever, they're coming from the bookshelf right behind me that I sign and I'm putting in the envelope. Like, I don't even know that I can get a family member to drop it off at the post office for me. Like, it is really me doing it. So, and then there's the writing of the books as well, and all of that. But so if anybody hears about my book, if anyone's ever said, I've heard about your book, it started with an effort that I made.
Right.
And I've had some traditionally published authors that I kind of like to read. I enjoy their stories. But as an author myself, I'm somewhat bitter and resentful that they have zero social media presence, that they don't engage, they're not doing anything. And they have these big, huge fan groups. And I'm like,
but how often do you think that's actually happening?
Well, there is an author who got very, very, very big on social media, who I was a fan of before the whole TikTok thing happened. And she has like no social media. She has very little social media presence. And
are we talking about the CH?
No.
Okay.
SJM. I think she's on Instagram now, but I started reading her stuff probably like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And like when it was first coming out, and it was like, she's huge. It's everywhere. I'm consumed by ACOTAR, like that whole series. And it was like, she hasn't posted on her Instagram profile in 2 years. Like, what? Like, come on.
But I think I see that as the big time exception, not the rule, right? Because, lots of times with authors who I work with, they'll say, I just want to become Book Talk famous, right? Or I hope someone picks it up on Book Talk and runs with it. But this is such an interesting conversation, because I remember at the end of 2023, one of the big predictions from 2023 was that traditional houses would start partnering with some of these big influencers on TikTok, because they made it so that some of these authors, the two of whom we've just mentioned, don't really have to have a presence. Now, it'll be interesting, by the way, to see how that carries forward. Right. With both of those individuals. I mean, they're kind of set now. They could quit if they wanted to, but I don't know that they got into writing for they wanted to maintain that level of anonymity even afterward to a degree. But the traditional houses didn't jump on that bandwagon.
Right.
So now there's all kinds of weird stuff happening on TikTok with imprints and.
Yep. And they're following the trend. And this is kind of what's funny. And it kind of goes back to the original point, is like, it's a lot of indie books that have taken off.
Right.
And on TikTok. And now the traditional is following or is trying to replicate what the indie authors have done, because I've been reading Colleen Hoover since before I published. Like when I started looking into self-publishing, I emailed her and said, hey, you have these 3 books out and you've been doing well. And she emailed back, was very nice. And I'm pretty sure that email came from her. So like I've been reading her stuff for years and years and years, but you look at what it did to her. And there's just several other authors that now have traditional deals because they blew up on TikTok. And now the traditional publishing industry is like, hey, they did this and this worked. How can we go back and do it?
Which is so interesting, because on the flip side, there's still but you're not a real author.
Right.
Right. So it's like it worked, but there's this legitimacy that seems to still be missing.
Correct.
So what is your approach for lack of a better phrase, staying sane, right? 20 books in, have you ever queried an agent? Or is this?
So I did when I first started, like for my first book before I self-published, I probably queried about 100.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew nothing. I was as green as you could be. I made all the mistakes. I actually did a whole series for my 10th anniversary of like all the mistakes I made when I was indie publishing for the first time. And I sent all of my query letters out in the month of August, which is like the worst time because everybody's on vacation. I said, I was researching, I was sending stuff out. At this point, not even everyone was accepting email queries. Some of them still wanted like printed manuscripts. So I avoided those because I wasn't going to sink that kind of money into it. I got one request for a partial and then immediately declined it. So I decided to go ahead and self-publish that book. I also knew very early on I couldn't write a query letter. Like I could write the book. The book was like 98,000 words, but I couldn't write that query letter because I didn't know what was needed, but I knew it wasn't good. I queried maybe 20 or 30 people for my second book. And then I said, that's it. I'm just doing this.
Right.
And for my fourth book, I did pitch wars on Twitter.
Yes.
And it got picked up and I got an offer from a smaller publisher. And I got the offer and I looked at the contract and they were going to re-edit it and give it a new cover. But I looked at their covers and they were literally pulling from the same stock photos that I was pulling from. Like they had couples on their covers that were from the same series that my cover was originally from. And so they were going to re-edit it and give it a new cover and give it a new name. And I would go from making 70% royalties on it to like 40.
Right.
Digital only, no paperback, no print. And I would be responsible for 100% of the marketing. And I went, wait, so you want me to like cut my royalties in half, not have access to print and do all the work that I'm still doing just so I can say I am with whatever. I don't even remember the name of the publisher at this point.
Right.
And at that moment, I decided that I was probably done. I did pitch an agent at RWA, but I didn't have a finished manuscript. She asked for the finished manuscript. I sent it to her. I never heard back from her. And that book went on to be pretty successful for me. So I'm like, okay, well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I decided that if an agent approached me, I would probably take it because there would be a couple of publishing deals that I would look to get into.
So tell me about those.
I'd go with an Amazon imprint, like Montlake or Lake Union.
We're done. Because this is so people, I've never traditionally published. Everything I've self-published, or I have my own publishing house. You probably do too. I mean, that's, what you do. Okay. So people have asked, would I ever traditionally publish? And I've always said, never say never. But as time has gone on and I've continued to watch the industry, I'm going to say it for the first time publicly now, the big five is just becoming less and less appealing. And having had multiple conversations with authors who are with an Amazon imprint or a smaller boutique, outfit, like that would appeal to me. So I love you. I don't know, maybe I'm looking for validation today, but let's blame COVID for you to say, that an Amazon imprint. But tell me, is there a strategy behind that? Because for me too, it's Amazon.
It's Amazon. So the strategy is Amazon's going to push your book.
There you go.
You're going to come out of the gate on release day with hundreds of reviews. You're going to get their marketing space. You'll get their things. You'll have Amazon behind you. Do I want to put all my books with Amazon? Probably not. I would go with a big five to get some name recognition, but not like just as a kind of a one and done type thing. I originally started writing women's fiction and then kind of morphed into the more romantic comedy books, the contemporary romances. But women's fiction is really, really hard to break into as an indie.
Yeah.
So I think if I ever queried again, if I ever really looked for an agent, it would be a women's fiction book. Like I have some ideas, but you also have to write the book, edit it, like pay to edit it. Like, and that's something I never got is why do you have to pay to edit it before you get an editor? Like,
well, you don't.
Well, no, but to query an agent, they want an edited copy, and then they're going to edit it, and then the book house is going to edit it.
Sometimes, yeah. And I'm hearing more and more that some agents don't want an edited copy, which surprised me because they want to see what your
raw talent is. Yeah. And that was the thing, like several years back at RWA, at the conference, it was the Rita Awards. Mm-hmm. And somebody's book won, and I remember her listing her editors, and it was like 5 editors, and it was like 12 versions, and it had taken like 7 years, like and maybe my numbers are off, but I said to my friend, I go, how much of it is her book and how much of it is the editors? Because when you have that many editors, how much is still her voice? Like, I just wonder about that. I think that's also part of the reason why I like being indie is I like being able to speak in my voice.
Yes.
And not worry so much about what the market is going to be, because maybe I have stories to tell that aren't out in the market yet. But I would love to get a traditional deal just to kind of get some name recognition, because I think that's how then you can like break into like film and TV type stuff. Like I have some books that would make some great Netflix series, like, Amazon Prime, if you're watching, Netflix, if you're listening. Right. We do not need more remakes and sequels and reboots. Like, there's a lot of original material out there. So to be able to get an agent to do some of that, I would consider that.
Yeah. And I think that for me anyway, it's important to just keep an open mind and just keep watching where the industry is going. How do you define success for yourself for each individual book? Like, I had someone message me this morning, and I actually shared it on my Instagram. She's self-published, and she was turned down by a variety of agents and editors in the traditional space who were like, this isn't going to go anywhere. She just sold her 3,500th copy of this book. And, she can track her numbers because she can see all her sales data. Right. Whereas with traditional, it's not as easy to do. Right. But she said to me, I thought it was interesting. She said, so I've sold 3,500 copies, and I know that's nothing by traditional standards. And I was like, what? No, that's not correct, because the average book sells 500 copies, even traditionally published books. So we have this, it's like we see what the SJMs and the CHs are doing, and we think that's the measure of success, and not realizing that selling 1,000 copies is a big freaking deal. So How do you set that for yourself? And
so when I published my first book, I had a terrible cover that I did myself, and I had spent like $5 on the cover image or $5 on the something. It was my own picture, but so I figured I needed to sell 4 copies to make that cost back, because I did not use an editor the first time around, and I did immediately pull it down and re-edit it. But so I wanted to sell 4 copies. So for my first book, that was my expectation. And when people not related to me started buying the book, like, that was big. Yeah. And so 2017, so it's what, 7 years ago, I had a really good year. I had a book that kind of took off. I was selling a lot of copies. Like, I made money that year, like to the point where I was like, oh, sugar, I probably should have filed some quarterly taxes, because I'd never made that kind of money before. And I said to my husband, if this happens for 2 more years, I can quit my day job. And it did not happen for 2 years. So having that, like, I was in a magazine, I was starting to win awards, like all those things started to skew my perspective of what success is.
Okay.
And because now it's been a precipitous drop since then, it's very hard, because I think my books are a lot better. I think my quality of writing is better. 3 years ago, like last week, I hit USA Today. I was in an anthology. So like, I have those letters to put. And then I go and I check my sales every day, and it's not uplifting. So there's part of me that's like the financial piece, because I don't want this to be a hobby. I want this to be a business.
Right.
So there's the financial business part, I would say, not successful. On the other hand, I have several books that have surpassed that 500 copy mark. I would say probably 2/3 of my books have surpassed that. So in terms of that, actually probably even more. Probably even more. Like, that's a success. But what I really try to keep myself grounded in is every time someone tells me they liked my book, they couldn't put it down, because I need to remember that that's one of the reasons that I write.
Exactly.
I work in a school system, and one of the buildings where I work, actually, a couple of people, 6 or 8 people, decided they were going to do a book club, and they're reading one of my books. We're meeting this week. And one of the teachers said to me in the copy room this morning, "Oh my God, I couldn't put it down." My husband was like, "Are you going to do anything today?" And she's like, "I'm reading this book. There's a sequel. What's the name of the sequel?" And she went on Amazon and bought the sequel right then and there.
Yeah.
And she's like, "It's so good. It's my kind of book." Now, I've worked with this woman for 9 years. I don't think it ever occurred to her to pick up a book of mine before. But she's like, "This is my kind of book. You're my kind of author. How did I not know this?" That's success. Like, that is what success is. It's not about, well, I made, $3 today.
Correct. And it's such an interesting point, because I feel like so many of us, myself definitely included, we forget about the obvious people who don't even know that we've written books. Right. Your next door neighbor, or the people that you work with, or your favorite barista at the coffee shop. Like, how have you gotten? So I'm getting the sense that you sell online, like Amazon. You do print on demand and okay. And then do you have your own store as well where people can buy? Okay. Yep. And do you do that through Shopify?
I have a store through Shopify. I just opened up a TikTok shop.
Okay.
But I sell both my paperbacks and my ebooks on my Shopify store directly. Okay. And then my print is available, like, from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, that sort of thing. I have my books dually listed with Amazon, and I print through Draft to Digital. So, like, if somebody wanted to go into their bookstore, like, they could carry it or get it. And then the majority of my titles are also in audio. So if I ever took off, like, my back end is all set. Like, it would be a Ron Popeil, set it and forget it. Like, I'm that person who's like, I just need the one TikTok to take off. Right. And like, that's me. Like,
well, no, I know. And so many people are kind of like, what I love is you can wake up every day and today could be the day.
Right.
We just, who knows? Right. What have you found that works? One of the things that we're talking about a lot in my own community is direct selling, because it's a big topic right now, whether you open a Shopify store or a TikTok shop or whatever you do. What are you finding that works well with that? And my big thing is always, you still got to get the people to know about the thing.
Right. And what I struggle with is, like, when I first opened it up, I got a bunch of orders right away. Like, I had 1 week where I had, like, I think I had 8 orders in a week. I sold like 30 paperback books in a week, which is fantastic. And then it's like, not much again, because I don't want to keep talking about the same things. I don't always want to be like, buy my books, buy my books, buy my books. And I feel like I am. I'm not great about sending out newsletters, but people aren't great about opening them anyway. So it's like, that's where I need somebody. That's where I could use some, like, marketing staff to just, like, constantly pump my stuff out, so I can just make my social media posts be about, like, the stuff I want to talk about, and have somebody else handle the bookend. But when I've done that in the past, it hasn't been great either. So I do, like, I put everything up on Shopify. I do offer a discount, a 15% discount for buying direct, because, like, I've cut out the vendor.
Sure.
So I can, like, instead of, a 70% royalty, and let's face it, for paperbacks, I don't even know how they calculate it, but it's not a whole lot of money. But for ebooks, instead of that only getting 70%, I'm getting 100%. And then, so I can pass some of that savings on to my customer.
The customer. Right.
And so, but, like, I did have somebody go through and they bought every single book.
Really?
Yep. And my novella, the novella that I have, isn't on the Shopify store. So I just, like, threw that in with it. She was like, well, you're buying that many. Like, I want to be able to have, like, some little incentive thing. So like, what else can I put in this?
What else can I put in? So how do you like, is there any kind of a fun, I saw a really fun reel the other day on Instagram. This guy, I was like, that is brilliant. This guy, when he got on the airplane, he had a whole box of his books and he wasn't selling them,
He
but
just
he was
started
just
passing
like,
them out.
yeah, he's like, you want a book to read on the flight? And, people who said yes, I think this is kind of a constant thing that we're doing as authors now, whether you're with a traditional house or not, regardless, is trying to find new and creative ways to have fun letting people know about the books. What's something you've done that's been most fun?
I don't know. I mean, I think like honestly, I think like going like the TikTok thing has been, I mean, I'm a middle-aged mom. Like it's not necessarily the social media app that I thought I would be like, yeah, I mean, I made fun of
Yeah.
my daughter for years, and then I find myself doing like the trending dances. Now I can't because I had to switch to a business account, so I can't use any of the trending sounds. So I had to give up my horribly awkward dancing on TikTok. But like I've put out some posts that were like, I should be really embarrassed by this.
Hmm.
But then people were like, well, if you're going to get out there and do that, I'm going to check out your book. So I'm like, okay, I will make
Okay.
an idiot out of myself. Like I'm not above that. I've literally considered getting a billboard on the highway. Like, you know how they're always like,
Have you really?
advertise your business here.
Yeah.
Like I've thought about that. I didn't do that. I talked with a company one time that they put books in hotels in the Hamptons, like when people check into different. So I looked at that and I was like this close to doing it. But then I reached out to an author who had been on it. And she was an indie author, has gone trad. I believe she was with Amazon, one of the Amazon imprints. And I was like, hey, I've met her at conferences several times and stuff. So I was like, hey, like, how did this work for you?
Hmm.
Because I'm looking at, sinking a big chunk of cash into it. And she was like, well, it was good for exposure, but I can't say it helped sales. And it's like, well, I already think that you're a much huger author than I am. So if you're still doing it for the exposure, so I chose not to do that. But
Well, and I think it's interesting because we tend to assume that the big authors aren't having to do a lot of the marketing, only to find out that they absolutely are.
yep,
Because
yep,
with a bigger name comes bigger expectation as
right,
far as sales go. And so there's kind of there's this line in the sand of when does exposure turn into sales? And
right.
when does the perception just become really freaking frustrating?
Yeah,
Because everyone's assuming that you're selling tons of books. And meanwhile, you're looking at your account like, so I sold one book this month or whatever
right.
the case may
Well, and
be.
that's the thing is like I get bummed because I had a stretch of probably like 4 or 5 years where I sold at least one book a day.
Okay.
And like that's kind of amazing. And so now I'll have days where I don't sell any, but then it's like, but I would say on average, I probably sell a book a day. Okay. That's some authors would kill for that because they sell a
Right.
book a month or, but I'm like, well, I have 20 books out and I'm on all these
Mhm.
platforms, so it's going back to what does success look like?
Yeah.
And, slow and steady wins the race because that's, one person every day
Yeah.
who's getting to feel the Biel. So,
Did you just say feel the Biel?
yes.
That is the line of the week. It's only Monday. Somebody's getting to feel
Feel
the
the Biel.
Biel. Um,
I don't write those kind of books, so I probably shouldn't say that because
oh, well, that's okay, but that's something I actually wanted to ask you about. So I was really impressed with your website. You're very clear about who you write for, and like you have the trigger warning, and then you are like, if you're what do you call it, like mid spice or
yeah, like medium spice.
medium spice, and it's like, if you're looking for this probably isn't for you, but if you're looking for this is for you. How helpful has that been for you in your writing? Like does that feel like it ever restricts you at all or?
No, because I have defined that around where I am comfortable writing. So
Mhm.
that is where I am comfortable writing. I certainly I read a variety of heat levels. I have friends that write very, very sweet, non-graphic books. And then I kind of read all the, I don't read everything, but I read the gamut. A lot of that really shaped up around TikTok again, because it seemed like readers were really, the book talk community that came out was spicy talk. And then you see a lot of videos where people are disparaging or getting frustrated if there's not, that kind of spicy time on the page. And I don't want a reader to pick up my book and be disappointed. So I don't think a lot of people visit my website, but like, if you have any questions, just go to my website, because it's like all there.
Yeah.
I do write in a couple of different genres, and I've had people tell me like, well, you should have a different pen name for your women's fiction versus your romance. And I'm like, there is not that much difference between my books. Like, sometimes I have trouble categorizing my books because like my romance still has a women's fiction feel, but my women's fiction books have romantic elements. Like, it's a big Venn diagram. And so I don't think I need a pen name. Like, I'm not writing, I don't have any like, romantic suspense or paranormal, or it's all contemporary. It's all, it's pretty.
I can't remember my own name. If I had to manage
more than one account.
Oh my, no.
I mean, it's hard enough to have a couple of burner accounts so I can like secretly like monitor my teenager on social media because she blocked me. So I have a few accounts that she doesn't know about, so I can like go and log in and see what she's up to. But like, that's hard enough.
I know. I stopped having multiple accounts, not for pen names, but like I had one account for my publishing house. I had one account for me. And then I had my page. I was like, we're all one. We're all the same person. We're integrated. We have multiple personalities and we're integrated and we're just one person.
I just want people to know what they're going to get. Like, and it's hard because I have a couple of, and this is the other thing, like I don't write open door scenes except for the books that I have them in. It's like,
right.
Like, why did I do that to myself? But I did it because it was authentic to the story.
Sure.
And it needed to be in the story. But I have a lot of friends who have a very conservative audience. And when they recommend my books, sometimes their readers are disappointed that there are cuss words and activities that they're not in approval of. Meanwhile, then like my friends who write spicy, if they recommend my books, it's like, it's boring because there was no hanky-panky. And it's like, well, there was hanky-panky, you just weren't in the room for it. Because that's not where I'm comfortable writing. And it would be very bad and awkward. And I've read enough books that had great books. And then you get to the love scene and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever, like, why did you put this in here? The book would have been better without it. And I feel like people would say that about my love scenes. If I could hire somebody to ghostwrite love scenes for me, I'd be like, here you go. Just, put some fooling around stuff. Here's some dialogue.
I don't think they're easy to write either.
So I don't want to write that just to sell more books.
Sure.
But if somebody comes to my page, I want them to know what they're getting. So there's a little bit of something going on. It's not super chaste, but like it's not going to get an X rating either.
So how many are you putting out a year right now?
Right now, I'm putting out about one a year. I had been doing 2 a year for a while, but my pace has slowed down. I had some like family stuff and like work stuff. I'm in a little bit of a slump right now. And with having a full-time job and some, family things, and it just, something had to give.
Sure.
And it's really hard to be creative when you're stressed and when you're like barely holding on and like the pressure of, I've got to get this book done. I've got to get this book done. The words don't flow when you're like that. And I found when everything else in my life falls into place a little bit more, the words flow a little bit better. I need to get back to it. I need to start writing again because the story's in my head. Like, I just wish I could like upload it directly to my computer.
Are you a plotter or a pantser or a combo?
I'm more of a pantser.
Okay.
I've always been a pantser. Like, I remember writing my third book and I was at a nano write-in. My local nano group does write-ins at like restaurants and diners. And I looked up and I'm like, oh my God, I just gave my character a brain injury. Like it was so spontaneous. I had no idea. But I also didn't know as much about the craft and the story and the pacing and the beats. So with that, and that was a women's fiction book. So like with that, when I'm writing in the contemporary romance, like I tend to have more of an idea. So I would say I'm a planter. Like
exactly. Yeah.
like I kind of know, I may not know what all the things are going to be to get them here. I don't know all the details, but like I know this is going to happen, and this is how it's going to end. Whereas my first book,
you do know how it's going to end?
I remember, usually. I remember calling my friend for my first book going, I don't know what guy she's going to end up with. Like who does she end up with? And then I made the decision, and then I had to like go back and change parts of the story to like craft it to fit. So,
well, I'm just so glad that thank you for making the time and sharing your experience, because there's so much about the self-publishing world that, I mean, I talk to traditionally published, hybrid published, which are really self and hybrid are the same when you get down to the brass, not just who's doing the work, but there's so many misconceptions. And so it's so enlightening to just hear a whole bunch of different opinions and experiences. And I loved the way that you spoke out. The part of the reason I loved it is because I didn't feel like you were attacking her back. I felt like you were just kind of saying, this isn't true. Right. So to make an across the board statement that, we're taking the easy way. Nothing about this feels easy. Nothing feels easy.
Saying, look, being a traditionally published author is so much easier because you don't have to, I don't have to earn my royalty, like my advance back. Like I don't have that pressure that if I don't sell X amount of copies, I'm going to owe the publishing company. Like I don't have that. I don't have the pressure of writing what somebody else wants me to write. So like being a traditionally published author is different, but it's not easier. You do what fits.
It's different.
It's just different, and you do what fits you. And I have author friends who are like, I would never want to be indie because I don't want to be responsible for all those things. And
fair enough.
Don't want somebody else to have say over those things.
Yeah.
Like I'm much more of
the thing is, it's not about what's good or bad or right or wrong. It's about what are your goals, whoever you are, right? As the author, like what are your goals for this particular book? Because you might have a book that makes more sense to try to go traditional. And then you might have, and we're seeing that more and more in the publishing space, authors who have been traditional and now they're pulling some back and doing some on their own. And then they're doing some because they're making a calculated, intentional decision based on their goals.
Right. And if I get around to writing the women's fiction book that I'm tossing about, it would make more sense to try and go traditional with it because women's fiction is just such a harder market to break into as an indie author. Romance sells much better than women's fiction.
Yes.
But I also, the one thing is like, I don't have a lot of patience. If I spend all the time to write a book, I don't then want to wait like years to see it come to fruition. It's like, well, the book's ready. I could be making money on it now.
Yes.
So like, that's where I have to just kind of give myself some discipline. So like I said, I work in the schools. My thought is maybe over the summer, I will try to tackle that book that I've been mulling about in my brain for a couple of years and possibly look at doing more traditional because I think it makes sense for that book.
Yeah.
If somebody, calls me up today and says, hey, we're interested in doing these and it was a good deal and it was a business deal that made sense. Can we have, the rights to, your center stage series? It's a good deal. Absolutely. You want to put a new cover on it? Have at it. That sort of thing. Yeah. I'm never going to say never because,
right there with you.
Well, I never pictured myself here with 20 books out.
Right.
And more on the way.
I know. If we had thought when we first started, I have 6, but even at 6, if I thought I was, had to write 6, I probably never would have written the first one.
No.
Because it would have just felt like, how do we get there? But you get there one at a time.
But because I had no expectations.
Correct.
And I think that is now actually is working against me because now I have expectations. So, if I don't meet them, then it's that, why am I even bothering? That sort of thing. But there was something really freeing about, well, I'm just going to do this.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, we learn so much about ourselves and as we're doing it, which is often very unexpected and sometimes unwelcome.
But also it's a growth process and I'm much happier with who I am these days for all of that self-reflection. I'm much more comfortable. And I don't know if it's just because I'm older and I'm in my upper 40s and that just happens. But I think a lot of the trying to understand what makes people tick and character motivation, then you start applying that in real life. And I have a lot more patience for people, a lot more empathy, or I can kind of spot the red flags a lot sooner. And it's just, I'm more content with me as a person. I can sit with myself a lot easier because of this authoring journey.
Exactly. Well, I will link everything in the show notes.
Okay.
I maybe I'll try to link all 20 books. I don't know, but I'll definitely link your site, your socials, everything so that people can find you and you can get more of them out there.
I would love that. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about it. I do love talking about my journey, and, we're doing this every day, and you don't think it's anything special because it's what we do. And everybody we know has written a book, right? And then you talk to like non-booky people. How do you even do this? And how, I don't know, one word at a time. I don't know. Like, it just happens.
Yeah.
It's just how my brain works.
It's just how we either create or sort through life or work through life or all of the above sometimes. All of the above. Yeah. Right. It's just, that's what we choose to do.
Right.
I actually am going to make a reel. I have listed out all these reasons why I write and why I've heard that other people write, because it's like, it's just different for everybody, and it's different on many days.
Right.
And so I don't know. I just enjoy hearing about all of it. Well, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.